And you're listening to Real Talk live streaming right here in beautiful, and I gotta tell you, beautiful Northport, Florida today. The weather is fantastic. If you're up north and you're watching, I realize how difficult it may be to watch all this beautiful weather we're having down south, but um, very, very nice weather. Just extremely pleasurable to be out in. Let's remember that we're in the holiday season. Let's drive safe. Keep everybody through the holiday season at home instead of the hospital. You guys know how I feel about that. And please remember on your way home from work, 75 should be at least 75 or under, not 90. Let's have a safe holiday weekend. And I've got a really special and a very cool person in the house because we're going to be talking a little bit about marketing and a little bit about Northport. But I'm going to let her take this moment and introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all and with John in beautiful Northport. The weather is lovely. My name is Katya Sutherland, and I am the Marketing Engagement Manager for the City of Northport Government.
Fantastic. So give us an overview of exactly what your job is looking like in 25 going into 26.
So I'm part of the communications division, which sits within the city manager's office. So I'm a division within a department. We're kind of split into two key sides, I suppose. You have communications on one side, which deals with more of the media, the words, the talking, the speaking, the communication. And then on the other side, you have more of the marketing, which I suppose is, if you think about it in a really basic way, it's more of the advertising side of things. As well as the engagement piece, which is really about getting out and engaging with the community, engaging with businesses, engaging with the people that call Northport home, whether that's they call it their home because they live there or they call it their home because they work there or any of those things. So my role is really supporting our team in going out and engaging with the community, hearing from them, and then using that insight to kind of generate marketing and support our departments within the city, but also the communications division ourselves with marketing and talking about and advertising Northport as a place to live, to work, to visit.
Fantastic. So we've got some rebranding to do, don't we?
Yes, we do. We are currently going through, I would call it a refresh. It's not a full rebrand. It's more of a brand refresh, but it will be quite different. I think visually it will appear very different, but actually a rebrand starts before you get into the exciting colors and logos and stuff, and it starts with that brand strategy piece. And actually quite a lot of that when it comes to things like our value proposition, our brand pillars, our vision, our mission, our values, we're doing a tweak to those, and because we think it's time for that tweak. But actually, what you will see is some of that won't change massively, but even just those small tweaks are probably going to change the visual output of how we represent the city visually.
So I think the most important question is, why does a city need to do that?
So, well, a city is much like a brand, much like a corporate brand. The reason that you buy Coca-Cola or you buy Pepsi is because one of them is more familiar to you, or you like the taste of it more, or you have been, so conditioned that Coca-Cola is the brand or Nike are the shoes, that, you follow those brands that you love and like and know about versus ones that you've never heard about. And it's the same for a city. A city brands itself to bring in residents, to form civic pride with those residents, to have people say, well, yeah, wow, I'm from Northport, to be able to be really proud of where you're from, but also from an economic development standpoint, to bring in business, to bring in visitors, tourism, all of the things that help build a city. You can only do that if you know the city exists. And without advertising that city, people aren't going to, necessarily just come across it. So it's important that we start looking at some of those things. But I think it goes deeper than that. It's for our residents. It's, the city has changed massively. The last time the city was branded, it was half the size that it is now. We've changed massively demographically. We were kind of a retirement bedroom community. We've changed. We're a lot more diversity within the city. The age range has come down on average. There's a lot more business here. There's a lot more infrastructure here. You know, how we talk about ourselves and how we look, the look and feel of our logo, but also our mission, our values, our vision, all of those things have kind of changed. So it's sort of time for a refresh, really to represent the city for what it is now, not what it was when it was half the size that it was.
Yeah, and when you think about the rebranding or the updating, um, it's like any other type of a business that's out there. They're always looking for how to enhance the message out, and
Yep.
isn't it ever changing? Like, shouldn't it be a kind of a good solid flow, but also a good adapting to the current situations that are happening?
Yeah, and I think if you take a look, you know, Coca-Cola is a perfect example. If you actually have a look at the initial logo way back when, you can see it's familiar. It has changed over the years, but it hasn't actually changed massively. As time's gone on, it has evolved along as the product has evolved, as society has evolved, as the economy has evolved, as all of those things have evolved. You don't really want to change something in its entirety. I think that what we are trying to do is probably a bigger change than that evolution right now. But what we want to do is we want to future-proof what we create now, so we don't have to do this again. As I said, the last time the logo was developed was back in 2008, 2010. We're looking at it again now in 2025. We don't want to be back here in 2040 doing it again. We want to create something that not just represents who we are now, but represents who we are in the future and the vision that we have, which is why it's important that we do that brand strategy piece, right? To understand the vision and the mission and the values and all of those things, because that is, you know, who we are now and where we want to go to. And I think potentially when we've done this previously, we've looked at who we are now and we haven't really future-proofed. So for me, it's about making sure we future-proof so that we can have that evolution rather than have to have any big changes in the future.
Awesome. So I do have a question already. Several Florida cities, thanks, Sean, by the way. Several Florida cities have animal mascots that they've seen on street signs and painted and fiberglass statues along the sidewalks and so forth. I know that we have talked about this in the past. We talked about doing some decoration of paintings of electrical boxes. I personally have seen that in the cities I've visited. We don't see a lot here. There are some cities that do it in Florida, but is this something you're taking a look and your team takes a look at too, and then brings it back with ideas?
Yeah, so this is a great question. Thank you, Sean. So the process started for the rebrand actually back in March of 2024 with my predecessor, Laura. And she presented to the commission this idea that we were going to update the brand. It was voted on and it passed. And then we had some windy moments. It gets windy down here occasionally, so that sort of there were some pauses. Then we had the referendums, and then my predecessor Laura, she found an amazing new job working up in Sarasota, so they brought me on board. So there was some time in between. We came back in front of commission in and around May of this year, presented to them sort of a refresh of what we were going to do. And the key thing was really to engage the community. And that's where my role kind of becomes important within the organization. In my role is marketing and engagement, and that is engaging with the community. I need to be able to engage with the community, to be able to hear from them, to be able to understand from them, to be able to know who this city is, because this city is built, you know, it's not just roads and trees, it's people, you know, that's what makes a city. And so the key part of the project was really to go out and listen to the community. So whilst we went through the process of rebriefing the commission and bringing a strategic agency partner on board, what we also did was we went out with a number of focus groups and a survey into the community. And from that survey, we had 23,000 questions answered. And those 23,000 questions created obviously a lot of data. And that was everything from What do you think of when you think of Northport? What images do you see when you think of Northport? What do you think of our sisters, our sort of neighbors, sister cities of Port Charlotte and Punta Gorda and Fort Myers and other cities a similar size to us? And how do we differentiate ourselves from them? And what colors do you think really talk about this city? And what things, what's our biggest challenge as a city that we need to overcome? And what's the greatest successes we've had as a city that we should celebrate? And all of that data has come together into sort of an insights report where we've really boiled down, right, what does the community say we are as a city? How would the community like to see us portrayed? How would the community talk about us? And it's really about that citizen input. I'm sure a lot of you can tell I'm not from Northport. So me deciding what our brand strategy or our logo should be, that I'm not the person to do that. I'm the person with the kind of expertise and knowledge to bring all that information together and then turn that into something, but I'm not the person to kind of be saying the who we are. So it's that data that is driving what we're doing. So we're currently in the brand strategy piece and we are starting to develop logos. And some of those logos, yes, there are very much some nature imagery that has come out of that. The kind of core things that came out of that survey from the residents were our natural beauty. People have moved here. We're a tree city, not a beach city. We, have come here for the lush green landscape and the trees and the waterways, and whether that's, man-made places that you can take your kids from a Parks and Rec perspective, or whether it's the Mayaka, forest, or whether it's the canals, or whether it's the creek itself, natural or man-made, people love that feeling of nature. The other thing that came out was this idea of, there's something about Northport. There's something here. There's a community. There's this welcoming, neighborly kind of small town feel in what is actually, relatively large population. There's this third thing that came out, which is, we want progress. We want to be able to have the shop that we can go to in the city and the place that we can take our kids to do things. We don't constantly want to be driving to Sarasota and other places to do what we need to do, but we want it to be done in a way that respects that natural beauty. So this balance between, progress and what makes Northport and its green spaces. There was a piece around kind of trust and transparency, and that's what people are looking at from the government perspective. And then there was lots of stuff about infrastructure and the sort of things that people wanted. So it's taking all of that stuff and bringing it together, but certainly the natural aspect, the cranes, the tortoises, the trees, the green, that came out massively. So we are looking at how we incorporate some of that into what we're doing. Absolutely. A very long way to say yes.
Well, that it's really interesting to listen to you talk about it, because you hit all the things that I hear from citizens.
Yeah.
So I know you're talking to them, because it wouldn't have come back so clarified through your data collection. We have identified a lot of different groups here in town. I know a lot of them, but and they all have their special concerns on the growth of the city and how it is happening. A lot of the things that you're talking about with communications and being part of the communications team, I am going to talk about them for just a couple minutes, because I think that partnership that you're part of is a valuable piece that a lot of people don't. I don't think they give enough credit to what the communications team is trying to do, because I think they're trying to bridge a gap between the nature and the growth. I think they're trying to do that between the businesses and the shoppers and potential people coming in town. I also believe that they're trying to do that with the transparency of the government. They're trying to find different ways to get communications readily available to the citizens themselves, so they can make their own determination based on information to them. I don't think we're different than a lot of cities right now. I think we're kind of throwing gasoline on different types of fires that we have. trying to ignite the conversations, so to speak, because we're in a town where, truthfully, we're on a live streaming event. We don't have a TV station here in town, so nobody really specifies Northport growth other than who we count on the most for that, and that's our city government,
Yeah.
and other groups that are involved. So how would you approach, or how are you approaching different avenues to get information to the citizens and collect data at the same time, on these projects that you're working on?
Well, for this one specifically, as I said, we've done a number of focus groups. So they were in person, and we held them at City Hall. Lots of different groups of people were either invited or we went out publicly. We also had the survey. Again, that went out publicly. We had a massive response to that survey. And we have the communications email address that people are free to use. We have had people commenting on social media. We obviously, look at all of the social media that happens. We have a monitoring service, so we can have a look at some of the comments that are being made on other platforms about this stuff. We have lots of Facebook pages in Northport that aren't city owned, and the data from there is interesting because people are really free to talk there, and it's and for me that's great. And I think, depending on where your opinion is, if you agree with me, then you're going to see me as being an advocate. If you disagree with me, you're going to see me as being a detractor. So being an advocate or a detractor for something is really entirely based on opinion. And as you said, we've got some broad voices in this city. Some of them agree with me and I agree with them, and some of them I don't agree with and they don't agree with me. What they have in common, these voices, is they are unbelievably passionate about this city. Yep. And whether I agree with what they're saying or not, I need to take that opinion into consideration. My role in this organization is not to have essentially an opinion. It's to take all of the data and treat it in exactly the same way so that I get a true picture of the city. And that's how you come up with the brand strategy. That's how you come up with everything. There's no necessarily in my world, there's no wrong or right answer to, do you like this? Do you like our current brand? Yes or no. Do you think we should be changing our current brand? Yes or no. None of those are right or wrong answers. I want to understand the why behind it, because if I can understand the why behind it, I can start to delve into the who we are, what's important to us, how we show that to the world, how we support our colleagues in economic development, how we support our colleagues in Parks and Rec, how we support our colleagues across the city, but also how we support the community. What are the community looking for? How do they want to be portrayed? A lot of people sort of say, well, you can't, all these things you're talking about, you couldn't possibly do that with a brand. And I would counter that with, if one of the largest and most dangerous cities can do it, then I'm pretty sure Northport can do it. In the 1970s, New York was, it was a terrible place. People didn't want to go there. People didn't want to set up businesses there. People were scared to go there. You did not visit Times Square as a beautiful tourist attraction when the lights had gone out in the evening. You steered away from those places. There was massive crime. The economy was poor.
Yep.
They brought in an agency in the 1970s, and the agency looked and went out and spoke to the community and talked to people and ran focus groups and did all that stuff. And they came up with, and we are talking, 5.5 decades later, it still stands. If I say I Heart, you picture NY. Like, I Heart New York was developed in the 1970s, and it has generated trillions at this point of dollars of money for that city, from tourism, from economic development, from businesses wanting to come back, from people getting that civic pride and saying, no, we're going to clean up the streets. We're going to make this a place that people want to come to. And it is now one of the largest tourist attractions in the world. And they, passed that back. And that was, they brought in an agency. They knew they had a problem. They did that. Other cities have done that in different ways. Seattle did it with the Emerald City. That was kind of a little bit of an accident. They had a competition in 1981. Someone came up with the Emerald City, and it stuck. It was run in the newspaper. It stuck, and in 1982 they took it on as their official kind of tagline, almost, or their official name for the city, and it blossomed in the Emerald City. When you think of Seattle, you think of, you know, the green mountains and the oceans and the lakes and the beauty there and how green that city is. Las Vegas did it a totally different way. Las Vegas said, hey, we're going to lean into who we are. You know, it had this reputation of being, you know, seedy and a little bit, you know, and in the early 2000s, they went, well, let's lean into that. And they came up with the tagline, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And that generated millions and almost billions of tourism as well.
And so it's still used excessively today.
Yeah, really. And it's so what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas has become like iconic pop culture. It's in so many movies, you know, songs, videos. So, you know, if large cities like that can overcome problems that they're having through marketing, through advertising, through branding, through those sorts of things, then, you know, it's not to say that Northport can't. And I've picked big cities that, you know, they had way more to overcome because there was a bigger landmass, there were big problems. And I don't necessarily think that, you know, there's not those sorts of problems here, but something with our brand right now is kind of missing the mark. It's not really telling the story of who we are and what we stand for. And it doesn't have that authenticity because we need to have the voices of the community within that. And that's really what I'm trying to do, is joining up that engagement part of my role, really listening to what people are saying, and joining that together with the marketing. And I think what's important to note is, we sort of said in my role, we're talking very much about the branding, but the other half of my role is the community engagement piece. And we do lots of community engagement, you know, things. We have the podcast, we have Northport University, we have the panel series that we've been running, all of these different ways to try and get input from the community. And when we went out with this survey, we weren't expecting to get 23,000 questions answered. And what came back was almost bigger than just the rebrand program. So we sat down as a team, and predominantly, you know, myself, Jane, who is our community engagement kind of coordinator, and she really spearheads this stuff. And we sat down and we said, hey, we've got loads of data here that is telling us what our community wants to hear about. So we've actually built our community engagement plan for next year, for the things we're going to talk about each quarter, for the content we're going to produce around what the citizenry have said, hey, this is the stuff we want to talk about. Because a lot of people use this survey as not an excuse, but as a mechanism to talk to the city. They answered the brand questions, and then they added, and another thing I would like to talk about. And we didn't ignore any of those things because it was really important not to. So taking that and saying, okay, this is what they're saying they want to hear about, so that's what we're going to develop a plan for, is kind of the second thing that we've been doing.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is that you listen to every voice when it comes to this stuff, and you try to plug and play them into the potential marketing strategy of the future by keeping their hopes and thoughts in mind as you progress through this. You may have to bundle them in categories because you can't always address one person at a time. But those 23,000, you've really taken all those in and categorized them, and really starting to implement the strategy behind the change of the thought process. And I got to tell you that the thing that I love about what you're saying is that I do it all the time. I with real estate, I do it with my live streaming. I try to have different guests on, give different points of view, different conversations. That engagement out, that I'm super excited for you on that, because I think we're not missing it. We're just not developed in that category enough. And I think with what you're doing, with what we're currently doing, and amplifying that up in an upward momentum, like our city is. I think some of our problems that we had prior is that we were growing, but we had an economic downturn that kind of prevented that in 2008, and that kind of stopped that pivot that we were getting ready to take, and now we're in that pivot again, and we're taking that adjustment, and now we're in a different we're in a different spot than we were in '08, because our city has jumped another level with growth. And anytime that you do that, you get amplified voices, you get criticisms, you get all kinds of things that come in the door. And I think what you're saying is this is a way to level the boundaries a little bit. And maybe boundaries is not a cool word, but I think it kind of levels the playing field so that everybody's voice is heard, and then the roadmap to success is developed through them.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to be able to say, and thank you for saying that I listen to everyone. I'm sure there's people I haven't heard. There'll be people I've missed, or there'll be so many voices that I can't hear them all. But exactly what you say, putting them into buckets, and when we did that, putting them into categories of, okay, nature is important, growth is important, trust and transparency is important. I built too many buckets. And we sat and we said, I can't have this many. And we looked at them and we said, well, really, these are the ones that are going to drive brand, right?
Right.
And these ones over here are what should drive community engagement. This is what they want to see, and this is what they want to feel, and that's brand. Yeah. And over here, this is what they want to hear. This is what they want to understand. They want to understand how our government works. They want to understand why we do things the way we do things. They want to have a say in the budgeting. They want to understand what's going on from an infrastructure perspective, and why price is the way price is, and why we're doing so and so with this infrastructure, and why we need these buildings or these other things. So that's not really brand, that's something else. So having then a look at, okay, well, let's engage the community with the information that they want across next year, that we can then sort of manage that through those two different ways of working, through brand and through comms.
Fantastic. So Chuck English says, good afternoon. Question: do you have any idea how many they can living units are within the city of Northport? How many? Do you know how many living units we have inside? And he had heard around 6,000, vacant lots. I'm sure, but we're not even halfway built out here in the city.
Yeah,
we're 104 square miles, and I'm sure you're going to write some notes along this path. And this is the beautiful thing, Chuck. I'm going to follow back up with what you wrote here, which is why I watched the presentation as the new branding and background graphic was that of a metropolitan landscape. We're definitely not a metropolitan landscape. We're definitely different than most of our neighboring communities. Ironically, Charlotte County just opened their beachfront on the canal, or on the river, and that gives them a different rebranding, so to speak, because now they've got beachfront, which they didn't have before. It's white sand. It's there. Charlotte County doesn't have beaches as down south towards Punta Gorda in that area. Out in Inglewood, yes, they do. And so I don't want to discard, but distance has a lot to do with where you travel to too, a lot of times. So having beaches, I would love to have one in Northport, but that would be the elimination of a lot of land. We're kind of landlocked here a little bit, but having that capability of rebranding ourselves, that does open doorways to educate people on who we are, because I've always said that we're like the hub area. If you live here, you're able to go up to Venice Beach. You're able to go down south to Fort Myers. You're right on 75. It's easy access, but you're also within, I think, half hour, 45 minutes of 12 to 14 different beachfronts. So we're kind of cool in that regard.
And not just that, from a gateway perspective. You're close to 4 seaports, 4 airports. You have 75, you can go across to the other side of the state, etc. And to answer your question, Chuck, I don't know the answer about the vacant lots, but I will speak to someone and I will come back to you. In regards to the metropolitan image, that was not saying that we are a metropolis. I think that was more talking to trying to find an image to denote city. We are a city. If I were to show you a picture of sort of a cute English village with trees and the sort of the more beauty we have here, you might not think city. So the metropolitan image was just to denote the word city, really. That's not what we're going to be coming up with. It will be reflective of that feedback that we got back from the community. We're certainly not going to start to have logos of us with high-rise buildings and, you know, skyscrapers. That's not who we are. So that's absolutely not where we're going with that.
Well, not talk about it, you know.
Yeah.
That's the really cool thing about Northport is we're new, and here we're having a conversation about, and a refresh of the brand. I like that. We don't necessarily have to redo what we've already done. We have to build on the success of what we're doing to make it more successful. Is that? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think a lot of that brand strategy is really embedded in that. I think, you know, we're starting to look, we'll be doing a workshop at the beginning of the year with the commission. I presented to them the work that we had done so far, and we're really going to be digging into the mission, the vision, the values, because that's really owned by the commission, along with the strategic pillars. So we'll be looking at those, but we have started doing some of that design work. So the tweaks, the refresh is really to vision, mission, values. I think we will see what could be a big exchange to logo, and then again tweak the color palette to the way in which we, you know, utilize typography and those sorts of things.
How does this work to draw in some other types of businesses that we've all been begging for many years, and it's not new. It's the standard. We're watching transitions in our nation with malls. We're watching Charlotte Mall kind of reposition itself even into Cocoa Plum. A lot of those stores have moved into the Cocoa Plum area and some other shopping environments in the Charlotte County region. Also up in Venice, we've got Detweiler's, we've got different things up there that I know I drive to, and we're all hopeful that some of these businesses will take a look at us. How does the rebranding help navigate some of the exposure to some of these companies to let them understand, you know, we're at 100,000. We're I think the biggest population city in the Sarasota County. So, you know, at some point, our rooftops, our population, our youth, those are going to start to really migrate into some of these business populations that look at us totally different than they did 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
It's about having that story, I think, and it's about being able to very easily visually, you know, explain who we are and where we are. But from a story perspective, it starts with that value proposition and really understanding that value proposition, and everyone across our organization, the government organization, speaking with the same language and understanding that. And the value proposition is really that crisp, why choose us? Who are we? And under that value proposition is the brand promise. And the brand promise is really the commitment to our audience of delivering that value proposition, supported by brand pillars. So we're kind of building this house. You've got this roof, which is the value proposition. You've got these walls, which are the brand promise. Then you have the pillars, and the pillars are, you know, what are the key strengths and the values that we have that will enable us to deliver that. And then you have that mission, vision, and value, which is how we're going to do it. Right. So it's about really defining that. And once you've defined that, then it's, you know, no pressure on our wonderful, and I mean this, I've been in marketing and I predominantly worked in agency and sports marketing. For a number of years, I worked in Formula One, and then I moved into tech, and I've worked with companies like Microsoft and Xerox and ServiceNow and lots of big telecoms companies and their brands. And I have to say, our brand designer is potentially one of the best brand designers I've ever worked with, and I've worked with some amazing designers. But then it comes down to her, really, that once we've got that value prop, we understand who we are, we've got the promise out to our audience, we understand what we are trying to deliver, and we know how we're going to get there through our mission and our vision. It's up to her to turn that into imagery. And that is not a simple job.
No.
That involves, a locked door and quiet and, a dark room, her and her computer thinking, and comes back to that question that we had earlier. Are we going to be using, nature imagery and stuff? And she has gone down lots of different paths. And you can see some of the evolution through some of the options. And then she takes a complete left and she goes in a completely different direction. But I think some of the things that she starts to come up with are amazing, and we've been reviewing them, and I'm really excited to be able to start sharing them soon.
Well, I got another question with Chuck, and it's really a good question, Chuck. Appreciate this. Do you believe what do you believe is the primary asset to our community?
Well, it depends which way you want to look at assets. So I'm going to give you two. And the first one I'm going to say is the one thing that makes us unique. When you think of Arcadia, you think of Rodeo Town. When you think of Las Vegas, you think of, casinos. When you think of New York, those things. So an actual physical asset we can touch. The one thing we have here that we don't have anywhere else is the warm mineral springs. It's unique. It's nowhere else. It's something and a treasure to be behold. And around that sits all that nature, right? There is a broader asset to our community in that nature. What do I think the most beautiful thing about this community is, and answer the question in a slightly different way, and I'd have to say it's the people. Whether you are in agreement with some of the things the city's doing or not, whether you're an advocate for the city government or not, whether you're an advocate for certain organizations within this city or not, the people in this city are passionate about where they live. They love where they live. Whether they've lived here for 5 years and they moved here because they wanted to raise kids here, whether they've lived here for 30 years and they wanted to live in the greenery, whether they moved here 2 years ago because Welland Park was perfect for them, whatever it is, they came here and they are passionate about this city. And it's my job to listen to all of those voices and to try and find that common thread that sits between them all, that means we can find that one way in which we can talk about, speak about, and visually represent this city.
We've got some really, I think, dynamic areas in this town that have their own impact. Welland Park, the Atlanta Braves, everything that's happening there with the new high school, that by itself is a massive impact on this city. And I know you've focused on Warm Mineral Springs, and I don't tend to disagree with Warm Mineral Springs, but it is not I don't know why that happened because I have it on silence, but and do not disturb. So do not disturb on my iPhone is not working today. But you have really unique areas in this town, and I think that one of the things that draws a lot of people here is that you can go to Welland Park and you have a different lifestyle than you have out in the estates, where you can ride horses, and when it gets dark, there's no real lights out there. It's you're in your own little community again, and there's some really cool parks out there that they ride their horses and go out into the state park, and the diversity that we have within our city, and then we have such a special park system. And people who watch me know I talk about this a lot, but we have we have some really cool things that we do within our city that other cities don't do, with our recycling programs, our ways to make funding back through what we do there. I think there's a bundle of branding that we can do that really separates us from a lot of communities. Not, and it, we're not better than anybody else. We're just separating ourselves because every community, when they identify these things, they have uniqueness to them.
Yeah,
We don't have the downtown Venice. We now have Welland Park. Well, we wouldn't have had Welland Park if it wouldn't have gotten built. So yes, growth has a lot to do with what's happening in our city, and it's not going to slow down. In fact, I think with a rebranding, um, aren't you hoping for growth and within the guidelines of what the citizens want?
I think that balanced growth piece that was talked about by most of the community, and the data that we got back, that's just so important. It's about doing the right thing for the community, and that, I haven't seen any plans that don't match that. And I think you're right. There's something really special about the city. My parents came out to visit. They flew home last week, so they came over for Thanksgiving, and I showed them from one side of the city, from Welland Park. We drove around some of that. We had a look at the Braves Stadium. We ended up, at the end of it, out in Yorkshire, out there in some of that beautiful,
Untouched area.
untouched area. And, my dad, we walked through some of the park system. My dad is effectively back in the UK. He's a town councillor, which would be akin to a commissioner. And he ended up downloading the city charter, and he downloaded the Parks and Rec playbook, because they've got a couple of parks out there that they don't know what to do. And he was like, I love the story stroll that you have at Five Senses. I love what you've done at some of the gardens. And he's already taking that back and saying, we should do some of this in our town, because some of the stuff that Northport has and is providing for its community is amazing. So, and I wasn't expecting my dad to develop a story stroll in Tiverton in Devon in England based on his visit to Northport. But he thought it was awesome, and it's it's a really unique city. It's very authentic, and it's filled with really passionate people.
Well, and we haven't done this overnight. People don't want to give credit to the past, and they want to tear down votes. And I listen. I'm as critical on past and present as you can possibly be, but I also understand that the growth side of things, we're getting it right. We're at ground level. We're kind of in our own little war zone, so to speak, because we're battling on what the citizens themselves want here, and yet we're craving so many things all at the same time. Because I'm going to tell you, if Top Golf would have been put up, people would have been mad, and people would have been celebrating all at the same time. So this population, the across the nation, 50-50, we have a lot of that here. So we're not, and I kind of like what you're saying, because you're not going to get it 100% right for everybody, but you're listening to everyone.
Yeah, I think you have to put the conversation and the data before the personalities, right? That's what it comes down to. Just as human beings, we aren't going to agree with everything everybody says. We aren't going to agree with every person, and it's about putting aside that personality piece and saying, yeah, but they are saying something important that I need to hear. They are saying something that I need to take into consideration. They are part of my data set. If they are a community member from Northport, and their opinion has a right to be heard, and I hear it and put it into the data set, and it becomes one of those buckets that we'll focus on as part of the refresh.
And Sean says, sounds like an online PR partnership with your dad's town would be an awesome cultural connection. I think the connection's already here in our town, which is you. I think that connection with your father and what he took back home, I think we're going to hear more about that. And I think that's the compliments that we give to other communities, and that's the ones that we hear a lot here. We hear a lot that with our police department. We hear a lot that about our fire department, our recycling program, our Parks and Recs division. Um, just man, the check marks that people come to Northport from other communities to see how we're doing it now versus when I moved here 25 years ago going Northport. Ah. We've gone from to we're going to go to Northport and see what they're doing right.
Yeah.
And they're trying to take that home like your dad and try to enhance that within their own community. That's the biggest compliment that a city could get, I believe.
Yeah, well, you know, he came and both my mum and dad, they sat in the commission meeting. I was actually presenting in it, but there were some other people that were presenting. So they came and sat down. That's why dad then wanted the charter, because they run things differently there. Their form of government in their town is that there's about 22 commissioners essentially, and each one of them is hired in to head up a department. So my dad effectively is voted in to head up planning. He's not a planner. He used to work in a pharmaceutical organization. And if he doesn't make it in the next election after his term is up, someone else will come in. So they don't have that consistency that we have in the city manager form of government, where you have staff that can keep the consistency, and you have the commission, which is the voice of the community, etc., and setting that strategy. And so they have a lot of start stops and find it difficult to get things done, which is why he downloaded the charter and was like, this is something we need to look at to have a think about our style of town government, which he's taking back. So yeah, I mean, we're doing things brilliantly, and part of what I've loved over my time so far in Northport, because I've been here for 6-7 months now, is the opportunity to spend time with each of those departments. Again, the communications team operates in service of the other departments. So public works needs to get some communication out there, utilities needs to talk to people, the other departments. And so again, as well as listening to the community, I need to understand the other parts of our business. So, I spent a day with fire going out with them. I spent a day with PD. I spent a day with utilities. I've spent 2 days with public works. And the recycling piece was very interesting. I can now say I am A1 recycler.
Yes.
So, spending that time with those departments, listening to them, understanding what they're trying to accomplish, so I can help them get that message out there. Again, it's about that listening. It's about that two-way communication and connecting the community with the city.
So I'm going to ask you something, because we're in dire need of an EOC, and Stacey Alicio and her team. I've talked to them in depth. This strategy behind the marketing and the branding, are we looking at incorporating some of this into what the needs are of the future? We have hurricanes here. We've been through them. We've had our fair share, and EOC is on high demand. And our city hall represents our EOC right now, and it is in this ever, I think, changing building right now, because now we have the chief of police in the closet, of which I was my bedroom during the time I spent in the EOC. So and people have heard me say that before, but have you gotten together with the EOC team, Stacey Alicio and their team yet, to look at what their thoughts are?
Yeah, so definitely have had conversations with them around brand. I know that my boss, Jason Bartolone, he is, working
Fantastic.
with a lot of HERCON stuff. So they're definitely connected. And one of the, I mentioned earlier that we had a lot of data, and actually we decided that we would use that data to sort of plan our community engagement plan for next year, the things we would be communicating about. I think our second quarter is around kind of storm preparedness, hurricane preparedness, getting ready for all of that stuff. So working heavily with Stacey and her team, the wonderful Mike and the lovely AJ, make sure that we get that communication out there, and make sure that people are sort of prepped for those things, but definitely working with Stacey on all the needs that she has.
Fantastic. Chuck has another comment. One more thought: the environment is the foundation of our existence. As for the environment, you can't save it all, but you can't save any if you don't try. Well, I agree with him, but I think the city goes over and beyond to try. I know he probably doesn't agree with me 100%, but I know that in his heart of hearts, he knows that they're looking at least trying to do all of the right things. The one thing about, and maybe you can address this, um, the growth side of things is a real big problem with people in our town because as you labeled us, and we are labeled this, the Tree City. We have a tree lady here in town, Alice White, who is decades into this, and people who have known her knows how hard she's worked at it, and those who speak ill about that now should be just ashamed of themselves flat out because they're so misguided on the information. She was a tree lady before she became a commissioner. And if you at all sit down with her, she talks about the conflict that she had because of the trees and the growth of the city and how that had to look at the future for the citizens. So a lot of these decisions that are made by past and present, um, they're not always what they want to do, but they're guided by what has to be done because the legislation or the plan of the city is there. Um, how do you come into a new environment like this, knowing that you have a label like the Tree City, which is amazing by itself, and can be utilized big time in a marketing strategy. But how do you take that and build that out into the community so they understand that the two things can exist at the same time? They may not always give you exactly what you want, but they're not forgotten either side, the growth or the trees or natural.
I think it's a really interesting question, and Chuck, you're right. You know, if you don't try, you can't save any. You know, they're just generally the world's getting bigger in terms of human population. We hit what 8 billion. So this isn't just happening in Northport. The populations are growing and migrating and moving and taking up more space. It's happening globally. I think in order to balance that, it can't just be about words. We can't just say we're going to balance growth with, you know, preserving as much as we can or doing it. We actually have to kind of eat our own dog food. And I'm one of the reasons for, you know, joining the city was because when I met people and I looked into things and I came and visited and I, you know, went through all of the interviews and all of those sorts of things, Northport is eating its own dog food. They developed a natural resources team. That natural resources team is new-ish. I think it's again, I'm new, so it's,
Yeah.
you know, a year old or so. They could have embedded that in Parks and Rec. They could have embedded that anyway. They didn't. They embedded that team within the development services group, within the development services department. That is a division that sits next to economic development. So they put those two opposing forces in the same department and said, right, let's do this. Let's eat our own dog food. Let's put growth and natural resources and preservation together. Let's put environment and growth together, and let's do this thing. Let's actually, you know, put them together and do this growth in as balanced a way as we possibly can, whilst really standing for the things that Northport stands for and its green spaces and those things. So I love that. You can't, you know, I couldn't do anything from brand perspective. I could create a logo with a beautiful green tree on it, and then when you drive into Northport, it's concrete and smog and high-rise buildings, and you'd think, well, this isn't what was advertised. So I can only create, you know, what we are doing, and it is my opinion that, you know, by doing that, we have, you know, eaten our dog. Let's not eat our own dog food. Actually, let's drink our own champagne instead. So that's what I think the city's doing.
And I think I think when we did that, um, there was great leadership that brought that in to play. and that's almost the current leadership that we have today. So a couple changes. Debbie McDowell's was part of that process, and who was the other? Oh, Alice White was a part of that. So we've had two change outs. The rest of them were here and promoted that and said yes. I think that's why I have on my side, being a realtor who drives around town, I watch all the trees go away. But I also realize the city doesn't own those trees. Those trees are owned by someone else. The city can't stop the growth. They've put the environmental department into play to mitigate those trees into more trees somewhere else that we do own. We are doing a renourishment over in the 34287 zip code of the park by the dog park. There's an area that they're putting lots of trees into and renourishing that area to amp that natural state back up. And that is exactly what other cities don't do. And that our natural division is working hand in glove with the city itself and its operating staff to redo these things. You talk about rebranding. We're retreating our community. That's kind of a cool thing too. But what's your thought on how different we're looking at things? Because what I saw is I saw you actually light up differently when you started talking about the environment and you talked about the environmental division and being in the same department. How many times do you see that in other cities where that conflict is in the same division?
I couldn't answer that question for you, if I'm honest. And I wouldn't be able to answer that. This is my first foray into public sector work. I come from a corporate or non-profit background, so I can go and look into it and I can come back and answer that question, but I couldn't tell you. I just think it's amazing that we are doing it. And that, again, we've listened, we've heard that people have concerns. As you mentioned earlier, I want the shop, but I want the tree. So don't knock the tree down to give me the shop, but I really want the shop. And to take those two things and to have heard that and say, okay, well, somebody needs to know how we do this. Somebody needs to come in and do that one. And Stefan, who's, heading up that division, is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
I've had him on, and I just looked at the clock. I cannot believe we're after 4. We're at 4:03, 4:02. So we're a little over, and I apologize for that. But you made 55 minutes disappear with a lot of information, and I am so thankful that you came on. I would love to have you back on when you get further within this whole plan that we have, and I think 2025 is gonna, or 26 is gonna be amazing. We've got a lot of things in the works in the fire with the hospitals coming on board now. Our community is not changing; it's changed. It's not going to stop. We are going to be a city. We're not going to be the quiet little bedroom community we used to have. But I still think we're doing it with a lot of heart, a lot of care, and a lot of focus. And having people like you come on board is I think the best part of what we're doing to protect our future.
Well, thank you very much. And I have to say, there's no one I've come across here. This is an amazing group of people I get to work with every day. The difference that we are trying to make in our communities, sort of from a communication standpoint. If you have feedback, if you want to be communicated with in a different way, come tell us. We'll find a way to do that. That's what we're all about. It's about listening to the community, and it's about finding ways to have two-way communication, not just pushing stuff out there, but stopping and listening and hearing what's coming back in.
So I'll give some kudos out real quick. The likes, Chuck English, thanks Chuck. You'll see him on screen as William, but we all know him as Chuck. Kelly DeCastro, the city of Northport actually liked it. So thank you, City of Northport, for liking it. And also Maximum Impact, LB, thank you for liking it. And please share and like this video. The more that we can get it out into the community, the more they're going to learn about what we're doing here in the city to change people's perspective. That's one of Chuck's favorite words, and I didn't even mean to throw it in there, Chuck, but you know, we've got to show the citizens the true government that we have here. And I think our government is really trying to look out for the best of all of us, and doing this collectively like you are. I think that you're listening to everybody, and that's really cool to hear, because that's going to give us a completely different look for the future.
Yeah, right. And it's driven by the rest of the team who, you know, brought me on board and let me do it, and let me do it with them. And Jane is far better listener, community listener than me, same as Jason and the others. So I couldn't do it without all of the rest of the team. And in fact, I do very little of it. They make me look good.
Well, I never gloat out loud about them. I always do. But everybody at the city of Northport, every citizen out there, the message is from Chuck. Merry Christmas to you both, and a blessed new year. Thank you for caring. Thank you for that, Chuck, but I mean that back, and I'm sure that you mean that back to every citizen here in Northport and the surrounding communities, and our listening audience. So you guys have a blessed holiday. I got goosebumps because I can't believe this went so fast, and I'm just so blessed that you were part of the show today. So I appreciate it.
All right. Lovely. Thank you.
This is John Rawlings with Real Talk, and I'll see you in the new year. I'm not going to do a show next week in between. I'm going to take it off, but look forward to seeing you all in the new year, and have a blessed holiday. Be safe.